My husband called my sister a freeloader and forced me to cut her off, but when I exposed his shady dealings with his mother, his fake mask fell off. My sister, a 21-year-old female, started her first job a few weeks ago and has moved into an apartment a few buildings away from my place. My husband, who is 29, and I, a 26-year-old female, have been married for over 3 years and have a 3-year-old son. My sister is living away from home for the first time and sometimes comes over to our place at mealtimes if she's too tired to cook and doesn't want to order takeout. I'm okay with this because she's my sister, so it's not really weird for her to turn to me for help, especially since she's still young and figuring things out. I need to be there for her. I'd like to make life easier for her, which is why I'm fine with having her over for lunch and dinner. It's not even a regular thing since she's very responsible. For some reason, my husband has a problem with this and made it known to me a couple of days ago. He sat me down and told me that he didn't want my sister visiting anymore. I was shocked that he would say such a thing because, as far as I was concerned, my sister had always gotten along with my husband. She's a quiet girl and barely says anything, so I couldn't see a reason why we should be banning her. I asked him why exactly he wanted her not to visit anymore, since this was a big deal. He told me that he thought my sister was a freeloader. He went on to explain that she was getting free meals here almost every week, and it seemed unfair that she was consuming our groceries without compensating us. He didn't want to have to ask because that would seem really weird and petty, but he also didn't want her coming around for food. I flared up instantly at what he said because he was making my sister sound like an idiot and being a huge cheapskate. Besides, this was my sister we were talking about. She's my family, so why on earth would I turn her away? On top of that, it wasn't as if only my husband paid for the groceries. I'm a working woman as well and contribute just as much to the grocery shopping as he does, so I have a say in who can consume what we buy. My sister is my family, so she has every right to visit. I told him that, and it was obvious that I was really pissed off with what he'd said. But he didn't stop there and continued to go on about how this was unfair to us. He even brought up the fact that my sister would never learn to spend responsibly if I coddled her like this. That simply wasn't true because she is one of the most responsible people I know. As I already said, she knows how to spend her money and doesn't waste it. Sure, she does have her share of fun, but she doesn't ever need help with basic necessities like rent, electricity, gas, or groceries. My husband didn't even try to understand that she didn't come over for meals because she was skimping out on groceries but because she was sometimes too tired to cook after coming back from her job or on weekends, which is why she came to her older sister. He didn't even know the reason why she'd visited but continued to talk absolute crap about her and refused to believe me when I explained her reasons to him. He said that I was being too naive and that I couldn't be that soft just because she was my sister. At one point, I'd had enough of his holier-than-thou attitude and just snapped. I told him that if we were talking about freeloading family members, then maybe we should discuss his mother first, since she'd been taking almost $1,500 every month from us for no apparent reason for 6 months now. That seemed to shut him up, and he began stuttering and fumbling for words when I brought that up. My mother-in-law, a 56-year-old female, runs her own small business that she started with her sister and makes a decent living since she's still working. She also has the money that my father-in-law left her when he passed away a couple of years ago, so it's not as if she's struggling with bills. Yet, she takes money from us every single month without fail. I don't even know why she does it, and my husband refuses to explain, saying that it's between him and his mother. I didn't even find out about it until 2 months ago when I was using my husband's phone to buy something, since my own phone was dead. That's when I found out that he'd sent a whopping $1,500 to his mom. When I asked him about it, he told me that she needed it for an emergency, but I knew he was lying because I'd scrolled up to see the past transactions as well and could tell that he'd been sending her money every month before that too. We got into a tiff over it, but he simply refused to explain anything to me and then gave up asking since he pretty much just told me by the end of the argument that it was his money, and he could do whatever he wanted with it. After that, I didn't ask him about it because it was true. I'd only brought it up this time to show him just how hypocritical he was when it came to his mother. It's his money that's being spent, but when it's about my sister, it's our money and our groceries all of a sudden, even though the truth is that I'm the one who looks after the whole kitchen. It's mostly me who spends money on grocery shopping, so I can choose to cook for my sister, and he has absolutely no right to stop me since I haven't stopped him from sending money to his mother. We split the bills equally in our house, so it's not even as if he's spending more than I am. As soon as I brought up the whole situation with his mother, he immediately got really defensive and started trying to make it seem as if that was something completely irrelevant, even though it wasn't. When he was unable to come up with anything, he said that he was putting his foot down, and his word was final: my sister wouldn't be welcome in our house anymore. That was absolutely unacceptable to me, and I told him that this was my house as well, and he couldn't just announce his decision and expect me to quietly accept it as if I was his inferior. I told him that if he's allowed to give his mother money every month for no apparent reason, money that could be used for us, then I can choose to invite my sister over for meals as well. Then he started throwing a really immature temper tantrum and said that there was just no comparison between the two, but it's a pretty fair comparison in my opinion. He said that my sister is a young woman who has no reason to tire out so easily and that I wasn't doing her any favors by coddling her, while his mother was an elderly woman who needed all the help she could get, so I couldn't hold that against him. I called BS on that one and told him that his mother was the last person I'd call aged and helpless, since she's sitting on the money that her husband left her, and she even has extra income from her business. Anyone with even half a brain can tell that she doesn't need the extra money from her son, and yet he's happily giving it away as if it's charity. He didn't seem to like that at all and accused me of trying to drive a wedge between him and his mother by instigating him, which was really out of line. I've never said anything about my mother-in-law apart from this one time, even though I've had many reasons and opportunities to complain about her, but I've always kept it to myself out of respect for him. He even called me a homewrecker while fighting and said that I'd always had it in for his mom, which is why I was trying to ruin their relationship. So, in a fit of anger, I told him that he should go back to living with his mom then. Well, he did. Half an hour after our big fight, he packed some of his stuff and just left without so much as a goodbye. I didn't think he'd actually do it back then, but what do I know? My son's been really upset, as am I, if I'm being honest. I just really have no idea what to think right now, since it's been 3 days, and he still hasn't texted or called, not even to ask about our son. Am I the asshole for bringing up how my mother-in-law has been taking money from my husband for months because he called my sister a freeloader? 4 days have passed since our fight, and today my husband finally called me, but it wasn't to apologize. He just wanted to speak to his son, and I agreed because our poor kid had been devastated and kept searching for his dad. He was overjoyed to hear his father's voice on the phone, and it sort of made it worth it for both of us, since we both had kept our pride aside for the sake of our son. After he talked to him, I decided to speak to my husband as well. It was a short and tough conversation, but I had to do it. I asked him when he'd be coming back but made sure not to sound sorry, since I didn't want him to think I was being apologetic because I really wasn't. He's the one who owed me an apology, and I didn't want him to get the wrong message. He told me that he still needed some time away to think about what had happened and just cool off in general. He was indeed living with his mother, since I could hear her talking in the background, so I don't think he'll be coming back anytime soon, at least not for me. He might come back for the sake of our son, but not for me, since I'm sure my mother-in-law will leave no stone unturned in trying to turn him against me. His staying with his mom might be even more detrimental to our marriage, but I wasn't going to tell him that, at least not after the fight we had last time. We hung up after a short discussion about some mail that had arrived for him 2 days ago, and that was it. I felt awful, but I wasn't going to apologize, since I don't think I'm in the wrong here at all. If he wants to come back, he will, and in case he doesn't, then I'm okay with his decision because, for so long, I've been bending over backwards to accommodate him and his mother's will, but not anymore. I'm pretty freaking sick of it, and I can't just go on being the ideal wife. If he wants to play the good son, then I have every right to be a good sister without getting so much flack for it from his end. It's been a little over a week since my husband walked out, and it's been tough for me. My sister dropped by for dinner a couple of days ago, and we talked about how things had been. She knew that my husband and I had a huge fight, and he'd left, but she didn't know the reason why. At dinner, she kept bugging me about it and pushed me to tell her the real reason, since she wanted to help. I ended up telling her everything in spite of myself. I kept the reason from her so that she wouldn't feel bad, but I was so upset about everything that I ended up just blurting out all of it and then started sobbing, so that was pretty embarrassing. My sister was a sport about it and consoled me, saying that I should probably try to save my marriage, and she wouldn't come around anymore if it bothered my husband, which was really kind of her. I wasn't going to let that happen, though. Obviously, I love my sister, and I'm not going to push her out of my life just because my husband doesn't like it, the way I didn't expect him to just abandon his mother. If I can respect his family, even though I have every reason not to like them, then he sure as hell can respect mine. I was happy that my sister was so considerate about it and felt loads better after speaking to her. At this point, I don't think he's sorry about anything either. I can't think of how exactly we're going to save our marriage and make it work if neither of us is sorry, though. I mean, obviously, my husband and I have had fights before, but this is the longest we've gone without seeing each other. He's been to my son's daycare to see him and has even picked him up a few days to be with him and then dropped him off at home. That's what our texts and calls have been limited to for the most part, our son. If I'm being honest, I do miss him, and I want him back in my life, but not at the cost of my dignity. Like I said earlier, I've kept my pride aside to make our marriage work a lot of times, but I just can't keep doing it over and over again. Our fight and the way he screamed at me and called me a homewrecker keeps playing in my head over and over again, especially when I think of just apologizing and getting this whole thing over with. I'm really at a loss right now, to be honest. I don't even know if my husband wants to make it work with me anymore, since there's been no effort to make things right on his part. I guess this might be the end of the road for us if he doesn't step up and, well, just do something to tell me he isn't giving up on us. My mother-in-law visited me today, and that was quite a shock for me. I guess you guys know that we're not really on the best of terms, so for her to come to my humble abode with her presence was a huge deal. I tried to hide my surprise, but I must have failed, since she greeted me by telling me that she knew she wasn't welcome here, and neither was she herself willing to come, but she felt it was necessary since my husband and I had been fighting over something so petty for ages now. I guess it has been ages, since 2 weeks have passed, and my husband and I haven't spoken about anything other than our son. I'd pretty much given up already and was even thinking about filing for divorce today when my mother-in-law showed up. I thought that was a sign from the universe that I shouldn't give up so soon and that maybe there was still some chance of things working out, but as it turns out, it was quite the opposite. My mother-in-law had come to talk to me about my marriage, but I still can't figure out if her intention was to help or to ruin it even more. If she intended to help, then she did a terrible job of it. Now I'm convinced that if my husband and I want to stay together, then we absolutely need to cut this woman out of our lives. Today, she sat me down in my own house and started explaining how I had no business bringing up the money that my husband sends her, his own mother, since it wasn't my money. She told me that it was their arrangement that didn't concern me, but since I brought it up to demean my husband, she thought she might as well explain. Apparently, the money he sends her is so that he doesn't end up spending his entire salary on household expenses and so that I'm forced to contribute, since she's aware of how working women treat their own money as only theirs and their husband's money as money for both. She'd warned my husband about this and had worked out this arrangement, and she was basically safeguarding the money from me, like I was some materialistic gold digger. She even went on to tell me that what my husband was doing was totally different from what I was doing, since he was just looking out for himself so that he would have money for himself in the future, and I don't end up spending all of it, while I was just handing over hard-earned money to my sister in the form of frequent meals. She had the audacity to even warn me that if I continued, then someday my sister would probably even show up with her bags and demand a place to live because she didn't want to pay rent. She ended by telling me that she hoped I understood where she was coming from and called my husband to apologize soon, since she wouldn't want him to suffer even more than he already did. After that, she finally left, and even though it's been close to an hour since she's been gone, I'm still fuming. I can't even bring myself to believe that she just said all of those awful things to my face, and even worse, I can't believe that my husband also believed that I was the kind of woman who would spend my husband's money more than my own. I'm honestly disgusted. I wish I could go back to not knowing the real reason that my husband had been sending her the money, but I can't anymore. What my mother-in-law implied about me was horrible, and my husband is the kind of man who actually believes that as well, in spite of the fact that I've always talked about how important equality in a marriage is to me. I haven't just talked about it either, but I've always tried my best to make sure that neither of us ends up spending more than the other, since money, whether we like it or not, is an important aspect. I'm a working woman too, and I work just as hard as him, so this was humiliating, to say the least. I can't see any way out of this other than divorce, and I guess that's what I'll have to do now. Anyway, I've pretty much given up any hope of reconciliation, and today's conversation with my mother-in-law makes me feel that it'll be the best for both of us to stay apart. Yesterday, my mother-in-law's visit cast a shadow over the house, her presence a reminder of the tangled ties binding our family. Just hours ago, as evening settled in, my husband arrived with our son. It had been an age since we last stood in the same room, our encounters reduced to brief exchanges at the doorstep, where he'd leave our son without crossing into my space. Today, however, he stepped inside, a small but significant act that stirred a mix of nostalgia and unease. He looked worn, his face etched with fatigue, eyes dulled by burdens I could only guess at. I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, my own stress mirrored in the tightness of my jaw, the shadows under my eyes. Yet, we both made an effort to keep the peace, settling at the table with coffee, its warmth a fleeting comfort against the chill of our conversation. We danced around pleasantries before the weight of our reality pulled us to the heart of the matter. I admitted I'd been researching divorce lawyers, my words slicing through the air like a blade. He didn't react with shock or anger, instead, his gaze held a quiet acceptance, as if he'd anticipated this moment. In a voice softened by regret, he apologized for the hurtful things he'd said in the past, acknowledging they were unfair, a misstep he wished he could undo. The sincerity in his tone disarmed me, if only for a moment. Despite the wounds we'd inflicted on each other, we found a sliver of agreement. Divorce, though a looming possibility, wasn't the immediate answer. We decided to try living apart, to co-parent our son while giving ourselves room to heal, to reflect on whether our fractured bond could be salvaged. It was a practical choice, not born of optimism but of a shared desire to avoid further chaos. As we spoke, he opened up about a fresh wound, his falling out with his mother after her visit to me yesterday. The argument had been explosive, driving him to pack his bags and check into a hotel, where he'd spent the night wrestling with her betrayal. He explained the money he'd been sending her, a sore subject that had long festered between us. Years ago, she'd told him a story that played on his sense of duty. She needed the funds to repay a loan from her oldest sister, money borrowed to fund his college education. It seemed a reasonable request, a son, now successful, helping his mother clear a debt tied to his own achievements. He agreed, believing he was honoring her sacrifices. But she had insisted on secrecy, claiming that revealing her financial struggles to me would undermine her image as a prudent, self-reliant woman who had raised a financially responsible son. To protect her pride, he kept her secret, unaware it would strain our marriage. Yesterday, the truth unraveled. During their confrontation, she admitted there was no loan, no sister to repay. The money had been for something else entirely, a truth she only shared because she feared our potential reconciliation would expose her. The revelation hit him like a betrayal, shattering the trust he'd placed in her. For years, she had manipulated him, weaving a narrative that cast her as the selfless mother while using him as a pawn in her deception. The argument that followed laid bare her lies, leaving him feeling like a tool in a game he hadn't known he was playing. As he spoke, his voice carried the weight of disillusionment, a man grappling with the realization that his mother's love came with strings he hadn't seen. For me, this added a new dimension to our shared history, revealing how her actions had quietly shaped our struggles. Yet, in that moment, as we sat across from each other, there was a fragile understanding. We were two people, weathered by life's trials, trying to carve out a path forward, not necessarily together, but in parallel, for our son and for whatever peace we could find amidst the wreckage. When he confided in me, his voice trembled with regret for the hurtful words he'd spoken during our own conflict. His sincerity was undeniable, and though the wounds were still fresh, I found myself forgiving him. Yet, neither of us was prepared to slip back into the rhythm of our old life. The stark reality of our situation had jolted us, forcing us to confront the cracks in our foundation. He was adamant about remaining a constant presence in our son's life, a sentiment I shared wholeheartedly. Our personal grievances could be set aside for the sake of our child's happiness, which was our utmost priority. Regardless of his shortcomings as a husband, his devotion as a father was unwavering, and I had no intention of robbing my son of that bond, no matter the state of our relationship. Reflecting on our past, I recalled how our marriage came to be 3 years ago. I was 2 months pregnant, and though we'd only been together for a year, we felt no urgency to wed. However, his mother had been insistent, her traditional values pushing us toward the altar. We complied, perhaps more out of deference than conviction. Over time, though, we allowed our relationship to drift, neglecting the care it needed to thrive. That neglect had led us to this crossroads, where trust was frayed, and our future together uncertain. After much discussion, we agreed to live apart for the next few months, giving ourselves space to rebuild what we'd lost. The goal wasn't to rush into decisions, whether reconciliation or divorce, but to rediscover who we were, both as individuals and as partners. This decision, though daunting, felt like the most honest path forward. Living separately would give us the clarity to assess our feelings without the weight of daily routines clouding our judgment. We'd start anew, approaching our relationship with the intentionality we'd lacked before. Our son, of course, remained the anchor of our choices. We'd coordinate to ensure he felt loved and secure, his routine undisturbed by our personal turmoil. Co-parenting would be our bridge, a shared commitment that transcended our differences. The uncertainty of our future loomed large, but there was a strange comfort in embracing it. We weren't locking ourselves into a predetermined outcome. Instead, we were giving ourselves permission to explore what we truly wanted. If divorce became the answer, it would be a choice made with mutual respect, not resentment. If we found our way back to each other, it would be with a stronger foundation, built on lessons learned from this painful chapter. For now, we'd focus on healing, on rediscovering the spark that had once drawn us together, and on ensuring our son grew up surrounded by love, regardless of the shape our relationship took.